Hello, and my name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and on behalf of Soulivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing, I want to welcome you to another Truth and Power series event, broadcasting right here live on Soulivity TV. Now, we developed this series to bring together our national and international communities to discuss, debate, and create solutions to affect positive impact on our world. It is about inspiring and achieving the dream of more equality and equity, which results in true freedom for all of us. This is our mission here at Soulivity. We are an inclusive community dedicated to supporting everyone in living their best life by battling fear and ignorance wherever it may live. And today we have such a very special event. We are holding a celebration and discussion in honor of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We'll be learning more about these rich and colorful histories and cultures and how this awareness can turn into deeper connections that creates better outcomes for everyone. Now, as part of this event, we have a wonderful charitable partner. We are trying to raise money in support of the Asian American Pacific Islanders in philanthropy called the AAPIP in reaching its goals for the 2021 year. This national membership organization is dedicated to expanding and mobilizing philanthropic and community resources for underserved AAPI communities to build a more just and equitable society. Now, to donate, it's easy. Just go to Soulivity Magazine's Facebook page and click on the Donate to AAPI post. So, with that, let's go ahead and introduce our phenomenal panel. Janet Chu was born in Singapore, and since childhood, she found refuge and expression in drawing things both real and imagined. She is a professional artist who has created fantasy, spiritual, and mythological paintings over her lifetime. And in 2009, she was a finalist for the World Fantasy Award for Best Artist. Janet has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in journalism and is currently studying counseling psychology. She has experienced motherhood, divorce, Tibetan Buddhism, healing, and the supernatural, all of which encouraged her to help others heal through self-acceptance and creative expression. Dr. Serge Kahili King is the author of many books on Huna and Hawaiian shamanism, including urban shaman, instant healing, dreaming techniques, and Huna. He has a doctorate in psychology and was trained in shamanism by the Kahili family of Kauai, as well as African and Mongolian shamans. Dr. King is the executive director of Aloha International, a nonprofit worldwide network of individuals who have dedicated themselves to making the world a better place. As an author, Dr. King has published the world's largest selection of books and digital media on Huna, the Polynesian philosophy and practice of effective living, and on the spirit of aloha, the attitude of love and peace for which Hawaiian Islands are so famous. He also writes extensively on Hawaiian culture. Marja van der Risten is the host of PBS's TV series Kimchi Chronicles, which airs in the US, internationally, and is currently featured on Amazon Prime Video. She is also the author of a companion cookbook, Kimchi Chronicles, Korean Cooking for an American Kitchen. Marja has also appeared on numerous national and local TV shows, such as Martha Stewart, NBC's The Today Show, CBS's The Early Show, Arise, and various radio shows. She has contributed many articles and interviews for magazines such as Bon Appetit, Food and Wine Magazine, Harper's Bazaar, Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, Weight Watchers, The Cook's Cook, and even CNN. Guys. Woo! Woo! What a panel I have today. Welcome, one and all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
for having us.
Listen, everyone out there, if you have a question or comment, please feel free to post to any of our live feeds. This is an interactive discussion. I know today I'm going to learn a lot from these fabulous people, and I'm sure you can too. So if you have a question, please feel free to do that. One and all, thank you again for being here. It is my honor to have each of you here. As we were talking offline about today's show, one of my goals in putting forth and putting this specific Truth and Power series, since it's about cultural heritage and our ancestors, that this is a time for all of us to learn from you and to become more culturally aware, and then that can create even more connections between our communities. So thank you for being part of this. Janet, I'm going to go to you first. And what I'd like to do is ask you about ancestral stories, right? Do you remember a specific ancestral story that you were either told as a child or that you have come to know later in life about your heritage that you'd like to share?
I think my story is going to be almost kind of it's very common to this part of the world, but it's strange. But I think one of the ways I got hooked into some of the family stories was ghost stories. So they are kind of prevalent in this part of the world, and it was to hear my mother's experiences, and she had sisters. She had lots of kind of like the extended family to play with, and it was those stories that kind of hooked me in. And as I got older, it was kind of interesting to me because I was actually trained as a heritage guide. And so, if you ever come to Singapore, I'm very happy to share a lot of stories of the history here. So it was interesting to me to be able to connect my mom's ghost stories, or just family stories of the past, of what our family had to survive even during World War II, and then have that connect with the stories that I would share either to students or to visitors to Singapore. Again, always these introductions in these historical sites. That was part of my family's heritage. We lived really close to these sites. For us, it wasn't just like this was the environment that we were in. And then to be able to share these stories, not just in a kind of like a family capacity where I can share it down to my own daughter, but to share it with like the people who live here, or the people who are passing through or just visiting, is just part of I think the heritage of Singapore. And for me, it was like the heritage of my family as well, to be able to share the stories of what my ancestors, my family lived through. So yeah, they were interweaved in that way for me. So it's a privilege for me to sometimes have these opportunities.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. King, or Serge, as friends call you. What about you? What were some of the what was like one or two of the ancestral stories that you like to share that maybe that were part of your heritage and that you'd like to share?
Well, my heritage was fortunately expanded by the fact that I was adopted by a Hawaiian family. And so sharing one of their stories, or that are very fairly common here in Hawaii, has to do with what's called night marchers. And this is a phenomenon that a number of different people have experienced in the islands, but particularly on Kauai, it seems to be quite common. The idea is that people have, well, it's not the idea, it's the fact that people have experienced, whether they're Hawaiian or visitors, sights and sounds of an ancient marching of soldiers who are guiding a chief. Now, the curious thing, some people hear them, they hear trumpets, They hear the rattling of spears. They hear chanting. Some people hear that and see these people. Now, when you see them, it's like sometimes they are marching out of the water along a particular path and may disappear into a cliff. So obviously picking up memories of some sort. But the night marches are a common phenomenon.
Wow. Amazing. Marja, how about you? What's one of those ancestral stories that that you'd like to share?
Ancestral stories. I don't think I actually had any real connection to my ancestors until I was reunited with my birth mother.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of ancestral stories, not so many ghost stories in my family, but one thing they say in Korea is never whistle in the house because you're calling spirits in. So anytime I would whistle, she'd be like, So, I mean, that's the only thing to contribute to the ancestral thing. But I'm dying to go to Kauai just to see if I could
Wow.
experience that. I mean, I'm so into it.
Wow.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, I have to tell everyone that both Janet and Serge, as you can see in the screen from when they were up, they're both in one is in Hawaii and one is in Singapore. It's what time is it there, Janet, again?
Right now it's 17 minutes past 2 a.m.
And Serge, it's not that bad, but it's still early there, right?
It's a little after 8 o'clock in the morning.
So we really, really, really appreciate you both being here. I told them that I'm going to have to send them something nice to make sure that they feel appreciated for getting up at the crack of dawn or even before the crack of dawn.
Right.
Everyone, this is a learning experience for me. I mean, I'm delighting in that I'm learning that this show, I'm going to get to learn a lot about the heritage that each of you have. And so I was doing some homework on Asian Pacific people, and it's a broad term, everyone. I mean, it's not, you're talking about maybe 25, 30, 50 different countries that are all, and then there's heritage that's all in there and cultures that are all within it. So it's just not one thing. But there is a lot to celebrate too. In so many ways, Asian Pacific people have contributed to our lives here in America and around the world. I learned, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I did not know that Maya Lin, who's an American architect, was a person of Chinese descent, designed the Vietnam Veterans Memorial here in Washington, D.C. I did not know that.
Right.
What's even more surprising was she was only 21 years old. She was still a student at Yale. And her proposed design beat out 1,400 other entries.
Wow.
I did not know that.
Impressive.
So again, people, there's a lot to celebrate and there's a lot of history here to learn from. Serge, I'll go to you for this question. What's one thing that people don't know about how Asian Pacific people have contributed to either America or the world? Like, what's one thing that you can remember?
All right, one thing that people don't know has to do with a very simple food source. Food source was extremely important to the islanders because of intermittent rain. Didn't come all the time. They had to have famine foods as well as other foods that they could have. So having food was all the struggle. One thing the Polynesians did was, and like I said, this is not known very well, but the Polynesians are the ones, they're seafarers better than anyone has ever seen before. And they traveled to South America.
Oh.
And they bartered and traded for sweet potatoes.
Oh.
And the interesting thing, so they got sweet potatoes. That's the origin of sweet potatoes. And because it's a short-term crop, it was vitally important to them. But they brought it back and then through their travels shared it all the way across the Pacific to Asia. And we find in many places the same name, Kumara is one of the names that you see all across the Pacific and into Asia, that means sweet potato. Now, if they got to Asia, they had to come from South America. And the only people capable of doing that were the Polynesian seafarers. So that's one thing that they contributed.
Wow. Again, I had to take a minute. I'm like, that just blew me away. We could just stop the show right here and just end it on that. I mean, again, that's a staple in many diets and cultures. I mean, Margie, you know about. I mean, as our resident chef, you know how important that is.
Absolutely.
Wow. What's one thing that you're thinking about right now that people don't know that you'd like to share about how Asian Pacific people have contributed to the world or even America?
Me?
Yeah.
You're talking to me. Oh gosh.
I know so many.
So many. And I don't want to forget to circle back to the World War II and talking about you with your family history in Singapore. Because I think people have a very limited view of what World War II is about, Anyway, in terms of Asian, Asian cultures, God, I mean, I'm like, I can't even pinpoint one.
Right. What's the first one that comes to your mind? Something that you would like if I was around, like, Brian, did you know
that the Chinese built most of the railroads?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just, it's interesting to see how they persevered going through like the middle of America with nothing. I'm just, quite curious with that story and those descendants.
Yeah, and I read a little bit about that as well, where it's funny how the history of that is, dare I say, a little skewed, where there's when I was doing my homework around, and we're talking, everybody, I mean, I think the one noted number that I thought was something like 15,000 people of Chinese descent helped build the transcontinental railroad system. And there were some that said, oh, well, they were hired.
Yeah, right.
To do the work. Well, there's a whole lot of those people that died in building the transcontinental railroad. And so, there's more to the story than that.
Can I add a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead, Serge.
Because Hawaii is a multicultural place. And there was a time where the king made a deal with China to have bring people over to work in the sugar fields. And so they did that for a while. They were on a term basis, supposed to be there for a certain number of years. And what happened was, of course, when they finished up their term, so many of them stayed, and they're the ones that began the local businesses, which still have the old Chinese family traditions here in Hawaii. But there was no, let's call it, middle class. So they began to develop it.
Wow. I mean, what about you, Janet? What's something that's part of your heritage that you would like to share around where you're from, where it's contributed to the world?
It's funny. because he was Serge was just mentioning, the Chinese who kind of moved over to Hawaii, and I feel like because of my own family history and even just the stories I got to tell as a heritage guide, because Singapore is also a multicultural place, and we kind of had immigrants from all over Southeast Asia and kind of like southern parts of China as well. So I know it's a bit vague, but I feel as if when you talk about the immigrant story, even in my own family, there were these kind of like different journeys we took. And some of it was like by invitation, kind of like the Chinese emperor was also kind of expanding his empire. So at one point, I know one part of my family kind of came from that spirit of exploration that the Chinese empire had at one point. So we're talking about something like 17th century. They just kind of went out to explore the world, and then sometimes they just kind of like, oh, we like this part of the world, we're going to stay here. So Southeast Asia was one of those areas of expansion, and I'm talking about kind of Malaysia and the coast of Malacca, and so part of my family comes from there. And then a bit more recently, I've got my family in Hong Kong, and they were kind of like moving through. They were considered a kind of um, a kind of family that they didn't have like a piece of land they were attached to, so they were considered guests no matter where they went. And then most recently, even as my family's history in Singapore, it's a bit short. Like more recently arrived from on my father's side, and my mom's side, it's a bit more longer established here. And then in my own kind of in my own life, where I lived 6 years in the States, that was one place that was eyeing as maybe this is going to be my home now. And my daughter might still kind of exercise that right to claim it as her home. So I feel as if this story of immigration, of kind of you leave some place that you know really really well, and out of necessity or out of this kind of like spirit of exploration, you really try and like strike new ground, go somewhere else, like maybe some place that your family's going to have a better chance of life. I feel as if this is one thing that I can really kind of pinpoint to. It's happened at certain points in my family history, and I feel as if where I am now, where we can claim this like this heritage that comes from these different journeys, and all of them winding up here now, and leading me here now as well, and all the different places I've been. um it's a bit of a privilege to claim that, as if you know your family stories. And I feel that as time goes on, we're going to have more of these stories to share. No matter where you're from, your family is going to have come from somewhere else. It's going to have drawn influence from these places that they've been. And sometimes, like, by the time you're finally speaking to the person in front of you, and today it's with all of you on screen, it's just, I think it's amazing that we're living in this time where we can share these stories.
Yeah.
And then we still get to expand these stories forward. We're probably going to see places that our ancestors never got to see. They could only cover so much distance during their time, and now we're just doing something I don't think they can even begin to imagine.
Right.
So I know this is, it's kind of vague, but it's one of those things I've latched upon, as in, I think that story of migration, that story of going on and to places that your family's not gone before. I think this is one thing I love telling those stories, and yeah. That's one thing I can say I'm bringing from this part of the world, perhaps.
Jan, I mean, that is such an important part and so important point, right? That there is this rich, deep, multi-continental story of all these people.
Yeah.
Marja, I mean, you and I have kind of talked sometimes about your own story and the incredible opportunity that it came from you doing Kimchi Chronicles, right? Where I think a lot of the things that were part of that series and that you continue to do today, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
open up the kind of thought that Janet's talking about, right? Where you're opening up the door into this thousands of year old culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, people, remember the United States is a baby in
I
terms
know.
of its existence. It's a baby. I mean, there's places around the world that are way, 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 way older.
True.
And so there's the opportunity for us as Americans to learn more and more about our world through those lenses. First question is to you specifically. And you kind of talked about this before in terms of when you're able to reconnect with your Korean heritage. Can you talk a little bit about that process first? And then the second question is how did it feel to do this series? Right? I mean, as a Korean woman, doing a series that's specifically geared to educating people about this amazing culture.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll do a kind of short summation of what led up to Kimchi Chronicles. So I was born in Korea. My birth mother was 19 and unwed when she had me. So you can imagine in Asian culture what kind of stain that is. But she tried bravely to raise me on her own. And she attempted to do that for 3 years and then realized I had really kind of hit a roadblock in terms of how far I could go in life at that point. Being half African American was another strike against me. So she decided that it would be best for her to give me up for adoption, which she did. And I was raised in Northern Virginia by my parents, with siblings. And I always had vivid memories of my birth mother and my time in Korea. So it was like this ache that was in there to discover. So, I went to college. My parents kept meticulous records of my adoption records. I actually called the Korean embassy in DC and I spoke to a woman there and said I was adopted. I guess she had calls like that before. She's like, call this number. Hopefully they can help you. Did that. 3 months later, I get a call from a nun in Korea.
Wow.
She said, we found your birth mother. She's in Brooklyn. I'm like, what? I mean, back in that time, it was like 1995. I'm thinking I was going to have to go on Sally Jesse Raphael to find her. Anybody remembers that show?
What are the odds?
Freaking weird. It's weird. But this is my life always. So, I got this number and it was like a Pandora's box. Do I open it? Do I leave it closed? I don't know. I called late. This really gruff New Yorker picked up the phone. He's like, hello. And I was like, hi. My name is Marja. I said, formerly known as Brenda. Is there a Korean woman living in your house? And the phone went silent. I'm like, oh my God, I completely messed that up. And then I hear this stomping and he's like, Aunt Suki, your daughter's on the phone. And then my mom got on the phone and then fainted. So anyway,
Wow.
And then we talked for a month and then I met her a month later in New York. Funnily enough, I had no exposure to Korean culture whatsoever. I remembered certain things, but not the cultural aspects of it. When I first met my birth mother, when I got to her house, she had cooked every single thing that I loved as a baby. Bulgogi, cucumber.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't remember any of these things, but I tell you, when I took the first bite, like this memory flooded back. It was like, I know this. So after that, you can imagine that I was literally eating my history. It was like, what else can I taste? What else can I remember? What else, So that became a bonding for us. And as well as learning how to cook these foods that made me feel so connected, I was able to learn the language again, which I spoke fluently baby Korean. But I really picked up the language again through the food and cooking with my mother.
Wow.
And then years later, I had the opportunity to do this show, Kimchi Chronicles, which chronicled my story with my mother. Also my journey into other aspects of that culture, not just food related. And for me, it was a full circle thing because, up to that point, I had spent probably about 15, almost 20 years with my birth mother. And I still ran into situations where I would speak Korean and someone would have to point out, oh, you don't look Korean. Or did you just say thank you in Korean? I'm like, do you understand Korean to even know that's a thank you? I mean, hello. I kept feeling like I needed this validation for other people to validate that I was Korean. Then I do this show. And what I realized, spending weeks and weeks with all these experts that explained all the things that were lost in translation, because my mother speaks Konglish, you know, she can never explain all the details of all the ceremonies and why the, family day and Thanksgiving over there and what that was about. So once I got all these, spent time with all these experts, had all that historical information, I felt completely fully full. Like I didn't need a nod from anybody. I didn't need somebody to tell me I had a really great accent, I realized that hole was actually because of my own lack of knowledge of self.
Oh.
So once that was done, I didn't need anybody else to validate that for me. And then I used to get questions like, what do you feel more part of, your African-American side or your Korean side? I said, I feel 100% both.
Right.
I mean, I don't have to choose. It just happens to be that's what it is.
Right.
But, I'm part of my mother and part of my father, and I've been lucky enough to have both. So
Right.
I think people need that justification to fit it in their mind about you if you don't
Right.
fit a certain model.
Right.
Right.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Because again, it's the history and the culture, just like in the African American community, right? We come from different paths, different parts. I mean, people, Africa is a continent. It is not a country.
Yeah.
There's
And African is not a language.
It is not exactly. There are different languages, different foods,
Right.
different cultures, different histories of people conquering other people, and then there's intermixing, and so you can have both. And so this is true in the Asian Pacific community as well. And so there's this whole dynamic panoramic view of these different people, and it's rich, and you can learn a lot from it. And so thank you for that. Listen, we're going to take a quick short break, but when we come back, what I want to do is I want to go to you, Serge, and we're going to talk about Huna and the rich tradition that is part of Polynesian tradition that's there where you are. And so, because I want to get my Huna 101 on. So thank you, everybody. So we're going to be right back. So we're going to be back in 2 minutes, everybody. Bye.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame, living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us, a place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
Difficult time these days. Do you really want to sit in a doctor's waiting room when you feel unwell? There is a better way. Introducing Telemedicine by Teledoc. Cost-effective access to a nationwide network of board-certified doctors wherever you are. How does it work? Let's say you or someone in your household doesn't feel well. Just call the toll-free number to speak with licensed board-certified physicians via phone, video call, or chat, whichever you prefer. Average doctor response time is 10 minutes. Majority of the time, the doctor can diagnose your problem and even call in a prescription if medically needed. With our included RX Valet service, you can even save money on that prescription and have it delivered to your home. But what if your ailment is more of an emotional well-being? When struggles fall outside of the realm of physical health, Teledoc Behavioral is there for you. you're able to schedule a convenient time to connect with a licensed mental health professional that can discuss your most pressing non-physical related problems. And just like the Teledoc service, the same kind of prescription benefits are included when medically needed. All services have no visit fees and are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days per year. A better you without ever leaving your home. Welcome to Health Perks.
Yep.
And we are back with our amazing panel for our Truth and Power series celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage. Dr. King, Serge, I wanted to go to you because your knowledge and experience of Huna, we're going to find out more about this in a minute, is what I would call legendary. As we said in the opener, you have the world's largest collection of books on Huna. And from what I've read and what I've researched, it's an incredibly beautiful tradition and spiritual practice. Can you give our audience like a Huna 101 introduction? I really want to help people connect with how these traditions are important even in our today's everyday life.
Sure. Well, let's begin by understanding the word Huna, okay? It's a Hawaiian word. First appears in print in a dictionary by a missionary in the 1800s, meaning secret or hard to see. The next best translation came with the Pukui Albert Hawaiian Dictionary, which is the classic, the main standard of dictionaries of Hawaiian, in which that goes a little further. It's because it also has the meaning as a word of not only secret, but not secret in the sense of holding it back, secret in the sense of knowledge. Actually, that was mentioned in the first dictionary also. And not knowledge that's held back again, because sea spray is one of the meanings. Dust is one of the meanings. So what you've got is something hard to see.
I see.
Right? It's there, it's just hard to see, it's hard to recognize this. And in some of the Hawaiians themselves, a very famous, wonderful woman, Edith Kanakaole, she did a chant in which she talks about No'eau Huna in her chant, which is the hidden knowledge. And then we find all kinds of places, I've written an article on this, but they find all kinds of places in which this word is used for that meaning in Hawaiian. Now, there was a man named Max Freedom Long who was interested in Hawaiian esoteric knowledge, but didn't have much of an opportunity. But he did get an interesting idea, was that the knowledge must be in the language. And so he did research and he created a system, and he decided to call it Huna as a system. Now in Hawaii, there was never a name for the system. Maybe in particular families, like the family that adopted me, and I know of some others that have given it a name, especially important in modern times. In ancient times, you didn't do that. You just did what it was. Right? So the esoteric tradition is throughout the whole society, but differs from family to family. Because what the different families did also differs. So you had traditions related to the seed, and traditions related to the planting and that kind of a thing, tradition related to all sorts of different things as the families were related to different things. So when I was introduced to this by the family that had first adopted my father when he was a young man, and after my father died, they adopted me, the same man, as a grandson, and I had my training by my Hawaiian auntie and my Hawaiian uncle in adopted terms. And so this, I had to have a name for it still. And so I decided, because the name was familiar at the time, I decided also to call it Huna, the esoteric tradition. And it was the tradition of the Kahili family that I taught, which had a lot of differences, which is why I had to write about it so much. So I just kept that name, and that's why we say it. So when people say Huna is not Hawaiian, as a name for the tradition, that's correct. That's modern. But as esoteric knowledge, it's very definitely part of the tradition, the overall tradition, even though it might have a different name. So I concentrated on the first thing. I learned a lot from my auntie when I was in California. And so she taught me about Lomi and energy and healing and things like that. And then a lot of things happened. And then I was again in California and invited up to the family. So after the Second World War, after that was over, vast number of Hawaiians moved to the mainland because there was no work. So you can find Hawaiians all over California, actually as far as New York and Florida, they're all over the place. And they still carry on a lot of their traditions, many of which have esoteric meaning, like the hula. Oh, great dance. Well, there's the hotel hula, and then there's, which you see in the movies.
Right.
And then there's the kahiki hula, which is the old style. And then there's the modern hula, awana, which is the kind of graceful flowing thing that you see. And that's all nice and well. And then you can learn what the different gestures mean. But there's knowledge behind that.
Yeah.
That the hula teachers know. And when you join what's called a halau, which is a hula group, you get gradually closer and closer and closer to that. And once you reach the level of what's called an alakai or alakai, which means a leader, then you start to be introduced to the esoteric side of all of that, the meanings behind the meaning. And that is still taught. They don't call it huna. It's really not important as a word name for it, but they teach the esoteric knowledge as they learned it from their families.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Tradition is priceless, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, again, we could just stop or start a whole new show just on that, Serge. And I'm getting a little emotional about, because there's so much. I mean, you just told, when we were offline, you were telling us about that you've written 20 books, and a lot of these are on these different aspects of Huna, right?
Yeah.
Which means that there's even, and you're not stopping, because there's even more to share, right? Which means how deep it is, and how much joy and beauty and peace and love that comes from that tradition that you can share. Janet, you are an artist, a beautiful artist, as we saw in the opener around the drawings that you've given the world through your gift, which I can't help but be taken to a different realm when I'm looking at them. It's like, and again, art's supposed to invoke, right? It's supposed to invoke something within you at a feeling level, right? Tell us about your life, your connection between your life experience and the creation of these works, because I'm sure that there's something there for you, right?
Well, what you just mentioned, which was that art can evoke a feeling. And for me, maybe as an artist, I feel like it's a bit flipped. Because for me, the artwork has to come from the feeling. It has to, there's different processes which you can use to make art. I think for me, some part of me kind of knows how to maybe use the tools from this very mental process already. But think about the self-love oracle that's going to come out from Beyond Words Publishing, that so many of the artwork in that upcoming Oracle deck really came from the heart and really came from these life experiences. So if I was going through something, and I think, a lot of me, especially the younger me, if I didn't have the word, or I didn't have a way of expressing a certain emotion, that artwork would express it for me. And so it is kind of figurative, it is kind of ethereal, and a lot of people have written about how it takes them to a different place, or it's very evocative in a feeling. And for me, that's my success. It's that if I could pull all of this out and put it onto paper, and it had to come from a feeling first. It had to come from an experience first. That for me is the real artistic process. Everything else is maybe like a mental exercise, but art for me is, it needs to have that core experience, I suppose. So yeah, and if it again, if someone looks at it and kind of, they're going to see it through their lens, and sometimes hearing their feedback to it kind of closes the loop for me. It's like, yes, exactly, like, message received. And it's just so important to making connections. I sometimes feel like it's not so much about the content of the artwork, but was that message conveyed?
Right.
And if it can touch that same part in someone else, that reflects what I was drawing it from. Yeah, I feel really lucky. I know this is not, I guess, not a way of working, which everyone can do.
Right.
But I found that it works for me. Yeah.
Right. And that's okay. We find what works and we keep at it, we perfect it, right? Margie, you as an artist yourself, I mean, a lot of people know you as a chef, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people also know you as an artist. Do you have that same?
Now you're embarrassing me.
I know,
No.
yeah, it's all right. We're gonna embarrass you. This is the show to embarrass everybody. I want everybody blushing at the end of this show.
I have not officially titled myself that yet.
But you are.
I'm dabbling in different mediums. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, and as that, do you feel the same kind of connection? I saw you kind of nodding as Janet was talking about
I totally
this.
Understand what she's saying.
Yeah.
Because I literally can't even do a piece until I feel it. Like I couldn't just say, oh, Saturday I'm going to paint from, 1 to 5. No, doesn't work like that. And for me, I guess my art comes from a place of color. I can't even describe it. It always starts with color and feeling, and I have to be happy to do my art. I don't know. It's kind of a hobby for me now, but I'm just so impressed by all the different techniques and artisans out there. I love your dragons, by the way. I'm a dragon. That's my year. So I was really all your dragons. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See, around the world, everybody. See, this is what I'm talking about, right? Now I'm gonna connect some dots here because there's a great series, and I love plugging PBS. I love public broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a great series on civilizations. And there was one episode where they began the episode by talking about Ansel Adams, my personal hero in terms of photography. I studied photography when I was remember the 110 cameras?
Mm-hmm.
That was my first little camera, and I'm like clicking away.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then I bought other cameras after that. And so they were talking about the one seminal piece of him in, oh gosh, now I'm losing where it was. It was either in Utah, where it was this tall mountain that was in the winter, and it had ice all on the side of it, and it was black and white, and it was spectacular. The next segment was they went to feudal China. and they showed the paintings that dated back 1,000 years before that picture was taken.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a painting that was strikingly similar in form, where it was this panoramic, faraway landscape of a mountain with a little temple that was at the base, and that it was that it invoked the same feeling for me.
Isn't that something?
And I was like, what?
Crazy.
And so as even as the three of you were talking about even the tradition of Huna, and then Janet, you were talking about how this connection to art, and you have to have the feeling, and Marjorie, this is all connected for me. With that little knowledge, and I'm saying little, I mean, I might know a little bit more than other people, but there's so much there to learn and grow from. Again, that I was like, wow. I watched this little thing, and there's a connection, centuries apart, where you've got a photographer and a painter that if they were in the same space and could communicate to each other, probably could have a pretty good conversation about some things.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And sir, go ahead.
Just a touch here, because at the university, I majored in Chinese studies. And one of the things that caught me up for a good while was Chinese painting. So I not only loved it, but I practiced it, and did a fair amount of that for the family.
Wow.
So feeling connection with it.
Wow. Again.
Weird. I just started the Japanese ink, black ink and paper. Yes. I'm playing around with it, but I just literally bought it a week ago.
Wow.
Wow.
Sumi,
yes, Sumi ink. Mm-hmm.
As we're talking about this, we're going to take a break. But when we come back, I want to ask each one of you specifically to take us through, let's say we're going on a trip together. And we're going to each home country. We're going to go to Korea. We're going to go to Hawaii. We're going to go to Singapore. I want each of you to be our guide and give us a special day of some things that you would like for us to see. I know it's a lot. It has to be a week, but you don't have time for a week, everybody. We don't have time for a week. But I want you to kind of talk us through what that experience would be like, and some of the things that you say, oh yeah, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Okay, so we're going to take a break, and we're going to have some fun when we get back.
Look up the dictionary and look up the word autism in the dictionary. And this is the definition that you'll get. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by obsessive and repetitive behaviors. And what a horrible definition that is, because we're so much more than that. What I would love is for the definition of autism to be changed, because it's so negative. As a child and a young man, whenever you look up words like this and you think, gosh, this is me, it doesn't really leave you with a great feeling, does it? I think it's time for that to change, don't you? What about the more positive things that autism brings? The passion, the drive, the desire. I mean, all you need to do is look up on the internet, autistic individuals. Without us, I'm pretty sure we'd probably still be living in caves and spearing fish for dinner. So maybe it's time to have a look at what defines us as a community, and let's change it.
Life is full of moments. And when sickness breaks your momentum, from the 5 a.m. stomach bug, or stress and anxiety at work, don't forget you have Teledoc.
Great care options by phone, video, or app. 24/7 access to doctors. And access to therapists 7 days a week.
From anywhere you are. Day or night. Whatever it is, we're always ready to help. So you can get back to enjoying life's best moments faster. Life is good. Enjoy it well.
And we are back talking Singaporean crab and other things.
I know the issue with the crab.
Janet, let's say we're in Singapore with you. We're there for the first time. Take us on a quick trip in terms of things that you would know we would have to see and experience while we were there.
Okay, and just knowing that Marja brought up the Singaporean crab, I think food is definitely going to be part of the tour.
Woo! Great, yeah.
But it's amazing because, for me, knowing that the ancient history of Singapore and then the colonial history of Singapore and then the World War II history of Singapore, I think I would definitely have to take you to the hill where it all started and kind of like our first royalty when Singapore was established, as a city and a port. So I'll have to take you to Fort Canning, and it's had different names over the years, but it's just one of those places where if you could stand at the top of that hill and kind of look seaward and see how there was this harbor that was like welcoming people. So much history has been around that hill. So I would start, I think, our morning there.
Okay.
And then I think work our way down the Singapore River. So much about that history has been around that river and then that harbor that it opens up to. A food tour along the way. And again, part of that heritage was how, it was the local, islander influence, but we're talking about like Indonesian, we're talking about Malayan before it was Malaysia, kind of very island culture before the immigrants started coming in, and be it from Britain, from China, from South Asia as well. These were kind of like the main influences that came in. Not to even mention like because some of the religions that swept through, including kind of Hinduism, Buddhism, and then Islam and Christianity. So it's just this very rich history that I feel I would definitely start on that hill. We'll kind of work our way downwards. We'll do a food tour along the way with all these different cuisines, and then the way that we start creating our own kind of like fusion dishes. So I think yes, that's chili crab, the Singapore crab that people have I think maybe heard about already. And then part of it maybe because I've been in that role of a guide before, would be to maybe take you to some of like the World War II spots, because this talk that we're having today that's like coming from all over the world. Not a lot of people know that Singapore and Pearl Harbor were actually struck on like within hours of each other, that fateful day in December 1941. So, there's that tie there as well. When we want to talk about the Asian Pacific region, we were kind of at one end of it, and then Pearl Harbor was at the other end. So even that more recent history, and then our respective parts in World War II, this is a lot more recent history, and some of us are descendants of people who lived through it, who might have lived through occupation or through that battle, for our future. Yeah, I feel like my day would probably start ancient history and then come forward modern history, and I'll take you to all the places where you can find good food.
Wow. Now we have to make sure this is.
in Singapore.
We have to make sure this is a walking tour, because
Yes.
oh man, that food. I might have to sit for a minute and let some of that food digest and then keep moving. Because
Well,
I'll be.
Brian is no longer in charge of the transportation because I'm going to need air conditioning in a van.
Yes.
All right, Serge, I'm going to go to you, but I'm going to make sure that maybe I need to qualify this because Hawaii is an island chain, but you're on the big island.
Yes.
And that maybe there's some specific things there that you want to guide us on. So I'm going to say, okay, we're in the big island.
Okay. All right.
Give us that tour.
All right. You have to land at one of two airports. Kona, which is the most easily reached, and that's on the western side, and Hilo, which is on the eastern tip. Okay. So if you can get a flight to Hilo, then it's an easier trip. Otherwise, you have to drive from Kona. There's two ways. You can take a southern route, and which is over Mauna Loa and through beautiful country, or you can take a northern route, which is called the Saddle Road. It's between Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea, and you come down into Hilo and then go up the road to the Volcano. This is the most awesome thing there is to see in all of the island. So it takes about 2 hours if you drive from Kona, and about an hour from Hilo. And so you come up to it's a boat called Volcanoes National Park. And it's at the summit of a volcano called Kilauea. Now there are 7 volcanoes on Big Island. There's only 2 or 3 3 of them. Okay, I'll put it this way. 2 of them are dormant and could erupt at any time. And one is right directly over Kona. But the other one is Kilauea, which is actively erupting right now. So when you go into the Volcano National Park, then there's a limited areas in which you can drive, because last year we had these horrific explosions. And it was just so bad, and the entire feature was changed of that main volcano, Kilauea. It's about 4,000 feet up, too. You have to know that. And so, there are several places you can drive. You can see the steam vents. You can see certain views into the volcanic crater. There should be now available to visitors a lava tube that you can walk through. And then there are trails that take you through the jungle on one side and through the lava fields. And then a trail on the other side where you can see ancient footprints embedded in the lava from a group of Hawaiians.
Wow.
Yeah, they were escaping from an eruption. But some of the footprints come back because there were also families. Yeah, right. Because some families had the rights to cut certain types of lava that you could make obsidian from, and that's what they traded, their livelihood. And other families had the right to pick the eggs of certain birds, and that's what was their livelihood. So some of those people came back because that was their livelihood. There were also people who came back and had the right to use certain areas for making stone implements, cutting in the basalt lava. But there is an incredible amount of stuff to see on that trip.
Wow. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. Do you have room at your house that we can bunk? We'll pay rent, maybe pitch a tent outside. That sounds.
We're with Serge.
Oh, heck yeah. Wow. All right, Marjorie, we're going to Korea, and we are going to go to Korea one of these days.
We're about 100
Tell us about, we just got there and
I'm sorry.
you're gonna take us some, to the spots.
All right. Glad to do it.
You have your seatbelts on? Okay. So you guys will have already been checked in. We have to stay at the Westin Chosun Hotel because they have the best breakfast ever. So they have a breakfast buffet with Western style breakfast, omelet stations, bread station, everything you can imagine. And then they have the Korean Asian section. So you get like, your Eastern breakfast and Western breakfast, which I love so much. So that's my favorite thing. And then we would go to, and I like to stay at this hotel because it's near my favorite shopping area. It's called Namdaemun. After that, we would go to about 40 minutes to this village. It's kind of like the Williamsburg of South Korea. It's called Minseokcheon. And it's a 600-year-old village. It's still working. Like they have farms, like they preserved all the houses and everything. It's just a walk through. You can try traditional candies. I mean, they show you how to make different things. You can do like traditional archery, all the games and seesaws they used to do, horseback riding. There's a whole amusement park. But the thing about Minseokcheon is it's got an amazing food court with like these big, huge cauldrons and these grandmothers that make all these amazing pancakes and dishes and rice. And it's just, I mean, you could really, really spend all day there.
Woo!
So then after that, we would go have an official dinner, but kind of a detox day. So we'd go to the sauna where they actually make charcoal. So they burn the wood to make charcoal there. And then while you're in this sauna, they make the pork belly like with the same fire. And where you're roasting inside. It's so great. After that, we'd go back to the hotel, change. Then we're going to karaoke. Right? Then after karaoke, if we're still standing, we'll eat again. Just so you don't, have a big hangover. And then we usually end with a Thai massage at the end of the night. 2-hour Thai massage. My cousin, she's got this app. 24 hours a day, you can find any place that does a Thai massage. I'm not talking weird massage. I'm talking literally 2 ladies standing on you. But it's great. I mean, after you've been drinking all night and a full day, it's like the best thing. All
right. So I'm gonna do a quick text poll. So everybody who's watching right now, if you had the chance to go on any one or all of these, which would you do? I know what mine is going to be all. But put something in the chat. Tell us what you think about all these amazing experiences, which are all part of the heritage. Again, this is what we're talking about. I mean, there's such rich things to learn about and explore and to grow from. Thank you guys for that. I'm hungry now. I'm hungry.
Same.
I'm like, wow. Okay. When we were at break, we started to talk about one tradition that is part of Asian Pacific culture. And Margie, you were talking about this culture of respect, right? What specifically do you mean by this culture of respect that's part of these communities?
I think in Asian culture, at least in Korea, when you talk about being religious, when you do those religious ceremonies or praying, it's really more to your ancestors, and remembering them. What I love and what struck me about learning about my Korean culture later on in life was that there's such a sense of community. I mean, the philosophy is, it's not a country without its people. So everyone treats everyone with respect. I mean, generally speaking. So if I were to go to the grocery store and there's a woman my grandmother's age, I would call her grandmother, not like, hey, lady. It would be grandmother, and accordingly, uncle, aunt, somebody older than you, big sister. I just always found that so respectful. And it tied in and was even more poignant to me during this COVID, because I'm like, I'm looking at Americans who are having such a freaking hard time wearing a little mask. It's a little ask, I know. Just for everyone's general safety. And
Right.
masks have been used as a way of preventing spread if you're not feeling well. When it was allergy season and dust is coming through, they have like a really dusty part of the year. It's just like a given that you would watch out for your fellow neighbor and man. You know what I mean? Because you love and respect your country and each other. And I can't help but think just how a lot of this could have, maybe curbed the spread with a lot of things. But if we just had that respect towards one another and concern for their well-being, we'd be a totally different country. But I feel like, it's great that America is a melting pot of different cultures and traditions. I feel like American culture doesn't really have that ingrained in it. It's more like we are settling and we need to divide and conquer and grow and build. And, I feel like it's based more on wealth and personal growth as opposed to rising as a nation, which a lot of these other cultures and countries have had to do, fighting other countries and years of war and all these things. So, frustrating this last year.
Right. Serge, how do you feel about this? What are your thoughts?
Well, in Hawaii, there's a Hawaiian spirit that still comes from the Hawaiians themselves and from the Hawaiians who have lived there and from the Hawaiians who are part of most of the other cultures here. I'll give an example. The main thing is that this sense of hospitality and welcoming and willingness to help. When my wife and I first moved over to Kauai, I had a small car, and we went into a store and we brought out some chairs that were not fitting in the trunk. Didn't know what we were going to, so we're just standing out there. A Hawaiian guy in a truck pulls up in his pickup truck. Hey, you need some help? That's a kind of a lilting question way that is now a habit with me. But I said, well, sure, that was a complete surprise. So he comes over, he picks up the chairs, puts them in his pickup. He says, where you got to go? I said, we're going to the North Shore. Now, this was down in Lihue in the south. He says, no problem. So he leads us up north. We lead him because we have to show him where we want to go. We go all the way to the North Shore. And he helps unload us. And as he's unloading, I just happened to ask him, where are you from? And he said, Waimea, which is way down in the south, way west of Lihue. That was no problem.
Oh my God.
And we found so much of that kind of hospitality and caring. They give you your first chance. If you respond to it, you're a friend forever.
Wow.
If you don't, you're out of it.
It's like, no. You get one. You get your one. We know what you are. After that, maybe you can redeem yourself later, right? But
work to do that.
But until that point, wow. Janet, what about you? I kind of saw you kind of nodding as both Marja and Serge were giving their thoughts about this. Is it the same for you?
Well, Singapore is such a multicultural place, and we've had, those people who might they would be native here, or there might be people who kind of moved here more recently, or even, I think again during one of our breaks, you're talking about some American friends of yours who have moved here for work, and so we're such a kind of an active melting pot, and it's been. Again, one of those things where I feel like maybe when people arrive here, whether it was back in time or even more recently, there is this sense of we have to be in it together. And it's such a place of so many differences, whether it's different religions or different, kind of racial and cultural backgrounds that people bring in. It's, I guess, even with the arrival of COVID, it was just this kind of this is a densely packed place. but there's one thing we can all do, which is to keep each other safe. So I find it, it's definitely something I've noticed here, and I can see that, even throughout history, there was always this kind of you can't leave any community out in the cold here. It's going to get obvious really quickly, and so even if I look at the history of, we were under the British at one, somehow there was that divide and conquer. I think that Marja brought up. It was there. They saw, even in the early days, there was an early population of, and I'm going to describe Singapore a bit here. Our four kind of like major groups that the British saw were the Chinese and the Malay, and then the Indians, and we're talking about the South Asians, and then others, which I don't appreciate that much, but it was kind of like this grouping for everyone else, including those more arrived from the West. So these were the four major groups here, and that was their way of organizing the city. And in some ways, you can see in our history there were sometimes attempts to maybe like groups against each other, but this is a very tiny island. It's smaller than Hawaii. I'm pretty sure about that, but we're densely packed, and I feel maybe it is that with, even if there are people who are more recently arrived, there's this history of what this island had to go through in order to survive and to kind of like get this first world status that it has now. People can see the benefit of being community minded. People can see the benefit of kind of like, what's good for my neighbor is good for me. And so when you talk about a pandemic kind of arriving here, that's one of the things that it was not an issue to get, I think, everyone on board, because the health of your neighbor is going to affect you.
Right.
So it's not even a question here, and that's one of the things I appreciate, that it is diverse, it is multicultural. We've got stories from all over the place, but maybe because we are very aware of how small we are and how connected we are, it comes with a bit of responsibility, if I really think about it. So people have brought it on board and practiced that kind of community care, I would say.
Wow. As you're talking, I couldn't help thinking about in my own heritage as an African American, that the statement that comes to mind is, it takes a village, right? That it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a community. And that there's this deep sense that we're all in this together, as each of you were talking, which I can totally identify with. Wow, and again, it seems like it should just be common sense, but it's not as common and it's not as practiced, and specifically here where, the individual is more put forth more as important, like my own. When that person, you can easily connect it, where that person could not achieve what they could achieve without this other collective body around them supporting it, right? Supporting them. I want to specifically make a turn off of this, but to something that's related, that's important to me in terms of this platform, where in the beginning I was talking about the fact that part of this series is about speaking truth to power, so that we can change, we can affect some change, we can support our community and our nation and our world growing. And one of the things that's happening right now that's specific to the Asian specific community is the alarming level of racial violence that's happening against your communities in response specifically to the COVID pandemic, and some of the falsehoods that have been said about it. I won't repeat some of that because it's not worth repeating because it's lies. But even stuff that was happening before then, I noted when I was doing my research on this that the advocacy group Stop AAPI Hate said it received more than 2,800 reports of hate incidents directed at Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders nationwide just last year. Let's talk about this a little. I think it's important. I think we have a forum to do so. I would just love to get first your reactions to what's happening in the world around this. And I'll go to you, Serge, first.
This brings
yeah.
This mind, if you don't mind. This brings us to mind a story of when I was in the Marine Corps. And I was a sergeant talking to another sergeant. And we had mixed races in our company. And one time he took me aside and he says, I'm really having a problem, a mental problem. He said, he was from the South, Southern United States, Caucasian. He said, I was brought up to think that all blacks were bad. And he listed what he was brought up to think about them. He says, but I'm in charge of these guys here, and they're good. He says, and I'm really don't know what to do. I'm going crazy with this. So I did my best with what I knew at the time to help him kind of get centered about that. But that was the point. He was raised from childhood to think a certain way. Normally, so often, the people who are raised that way don't have an opportunity to interact with. Whereas, in the Marine Corps, you had to interact, and it was very intimate. Couldn't help it. And that brought out what people were really like. And in this particular case, it totally conflicted with what he had been taught. And he had to really do some shifts because, and he did, he had to, about thinking about them differently. And that probably changed his life when he got out. But that's really the problem. It's what's taught. There's so much in so many different places where people are taught that anything different is bad. I mentioned one other thing too, a little bit. When I was in high school in Michigan, we had one black guy and we had one gay guy in the whole school. It wasn't a huge school, but everybody loved them. Everybody got along with them great. They were friendly. It was fine. It was the gay guy was, he really played with the girls most of the time. Nobody cared. He never got harassed. Neither did the black guy. But if there had been three of them, that probably would have changed things.
That's something.
The threat.
Yes.
The threat. Serge, as you were talking, I couldn't help but resonate. And thank you for your service, by the way. My family, as both sides served all the way back to the Civil War. As far as we know, there's probably people who served before then. And the one consistent thread that ran through that was related to a story of my grandmother's brother, who was a Buffalo soldier in the armory. I mean, you know about those guys serving in North Africa. Quick story, everybody, if you don't know the story of those guys. This African American armored division was vital to the taking of not only North Africa, but the taking of Italy before D-Day came around. And that there was a lot of battles that would not have been won without these guys. And they were smart. They used some common sense. And then people wanted to fight along with them because they were that good. The outcome of that was something that you just talked about. And that was that these groups that were segregated became integrated. And they fought as one unit, or as one battalion or division, because these were now their brothers in arms and in blood. and that coming back to the United States, even though there were some things that happened around civil rights that, we're talking about people who, that they didn't get money from the GI Bill and all this kind of stuff. The one thing that did change was that those certain communities, when they came back, there was certain change that started to happen, especially in the 50s. But the perception of those people were different because of that. Like, okay, people had to die for people to understand that these are our brothers and sisters, right? Marge, I'm going to go to you because especially you have a very unique perspective.
Yeah.
Because you're both Asian, Korean, and also African American. Mm-hmm. So you can see this not just two sides, but you can see the dynamics that's happening in both of these communities.
Right. Yeah. I foresaw this when, during the last 4 years with the one we shall not mention, just because that rhetoric was getting stronger and stronger. And then we had the women's, movement and Black Lives Matter. And it just, while it was moving in its sheer numbers and how organized people were, I couldn't help but think all these issues are not so separate, really. I mean, it's all about basic respect for human beings, be it what gender you are, what sexual orientation, whatever color. And it sounds very cliche, but what is done to one will be done to all eventually. So anybody that's, I've just been like, the Black Lives Matter people need to show up for the women. The women need to show up for the Black Lives Matter people. Black Lives Matter people, the women movement, the LGBTQ movement needs to be there for the Asians. Like, it just, you can't separate it. Like, it's all different. Hate is hate, anti-Semitism. I mean, all of it. I mean, we just need to all be there for each other. I mean, the whole Asian hate thing is not new to me because that's been our Black trauma for centuries. I mean, it's just unfortunate, especially since I think there's a lot of, there have been a lot of stereotypes thrown around about Asians, how they're weak or they're not going to be, they're not going to fight back. And I'm going into this story, but my birth mother, when she first moved to America, she moved to New York. And her only exposure to American culture was the Black community because her husband was a military officer, African American guy. So she said all the time people used to try and come into her store to rob it. And they wouldn't expect my little 5'3" Korean mom to kick their ass. I mean, every bum in downtown Brooklyn, they all respected her. I mean, I've seen her throw people out of the store. I mean, I just say that all to say is that's the stereotype. And I remember my mom used to say to me all the time, they think they got a one. Well, they got one. She'd tell me, she'd always say how they thought that she would just be docile or whatever. And then she'd be toe to toe, eye to eye with them. I think in a way it's an easy target. I mean, it sickens me for anybody to be targeted because of anything that they can't help being.
Right.
But to target, elderly people, those people, it's going to be a special place in hell for them.
Right.
I mean, and I live in New York where we've seen a lot of really clear footage of this stuff happening. I don't get it. None of it ever makes sense to me. I say, to whoever sees that, don't stand around with a stupid camera. I can't stand that. It's like, call somebody, get somebody's attention, I don't know, do something other than just record it. That's what makes me so sick.
Well, was it, I'm trying to remember if it was New York where it was outside of an apartment home or a condo or something, and the person
it was in Times Square, and there were these big burly doormen who were like holding the door shut.
And so they got fired, right? They got fired after that.
I'm like, really?
Yeah, because they
God.
didn't help. Again,
That's New York. Sometimes.
again, everyone, we're talking about an aspect of these beautiful cultures that we can learn and grow from, right? Janet, what about you? What are some of your thoughts around this? Especially, you know, you're in Singapore, looking back at America and what's happening here. And again,
scary.
Singapore is multi-diverse as well. I mean, but wow, what's it like for you?
I have to say I feel like I'm in a good place right now, as I'm sheltered, because here in Singapore you could say the majority or the biggest racial group is kind of like the Chinese or people of East Asian descent. So it's not so much that we're under any sort of danger here, not only from COVID but from hate attacks. But that said, again, because people are so connected here, they're going to have family, you know, in the US and different parts of the world, where as long as you look a certain way, you might be blamed for the virus. It's actually been kind of scary. And I want to kind of like draw in something that Serge kind of said, like in his story was, you know, someone from the South who had been told something his entire life. And that was something that I could speak to because somehow, like my years in the US, I was actually in these smaller towns, smaller cities in the south of the US. And sometimes it was very obvious to me that sometimes I could step into a room and be the only person who looked like me. And oh goodness, the way that the atmosphere in the room would just change. And there have been times in my life where, okay, you know, sometimes I can let down my guard, and yet there'll be other times where you kind of notice yourself almost getting ringed around because, you know, some people are trying to make mischief or they're trying to put the scare in you. They've just written you in a certain way, therefore they have to react to you in a certain way. So I've been in those situations where it got really, really scary, and this was more than a decade back. So I can't even imagine what the atmosphere is like. Actually, I don't even have to imagine because I am kind of following it. I have friends there, family there. So it is very, very scary. And yet I have to say Singapore hasn't been immune to it. This is kind of like a hub in Asia itself. So, you know, one of the things that we were was like a kind of like travel place where people would pass through, kind of catch a different flight, maybe stay here a couple of days before they flew off again. And so when we want to talk about, you know, where COVID originated and started getting all over the world, we had people from China coming in, and more recently, there's been a lot of kind of debate of with this new variant that we parts of the world. Again, Singapore being that travel hub that it is, even among Asians, I can say there's been that hate and animosity and that fear because of this virus. So I'll never present kind of Asians as a monolith. So one of the things that Singapore has been witnessing in the recent months and weeks is just even within different groups, there can be a bit of this splitting. I'm glad to say that not everyone is buying into it. You know, you always have those voices which are a bit more, I think, clear-headed and going, again, you know, don't start attacking one another. So there are definitely lessons. Yeah.
Okay, go.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about as we're talking about COVID specifically, and one of the big differences, Marjorie, you know, we talked about this, I mean, I think months and months and months ago. The communities of Asian Pacific descent, may it be in Singapore or Korea, or that actually helped their cases stay ultra low, right? I mean, Korea got out the mass testing and they were testing everybody. And
Well,
the cases went up and they went boom and went straight down and stayed down.
When people were told to stay home, they listened to their government officials. They also had some systems set up. My mom showed me every day there's a daily report of any positive cases. Then whoever that positive case is, they will notify, they are able to track where that person was and then notify people who were in that area due to their cell phones.
Wow.
And then if they had any kind of encounter, they could go get tested, or at least it would be an alert. It's just information. I mean, that kind of system's impossible here because Americans won't even take the vaccine. They think you're getting microchipped. Well, guess what? Microchipped. They know where we are all the time.
Can I add something, please? Okay. First of all, in Hawaii, people are not having a problem with the vaccination like in many other places. Kauai is already 50% vaccinated.
That's great.
Good.
It's rising. And the other thing is, this is a little different, but I think it's important to bring out when we're talking about a cultural heritage. I spent 7 years in West Africa doing community development for a nonprofit. And I had the free run because of my situation. I did not have any restrictions from the local governments. I could go anywhere I worked in about 6 countries. I could go anywhere I wanted because I was helping to develop local projects. The significant thing I want to bring up is never once in all 7 years, and I came across, Caucasian Peace Corps people too, who were out way out in the bush, but never once in 7 years did experience or hear of a single case of prejudice whatsoever because we were Caucasian. None. We were people, and we were treated like people. And as long as we acted like people,
right.
And then we were part of the group. Okay, I just wanted to say that was so significant.
So true.
Wow.
I agree to your point. I think outside of America, every other country, pretty much, that I've had the ability to visit, has always judged you based on your character. I'm not saying there's not racism out there, but I think in general, most cultures outside of Europe, I think generally, tend to base their judgment on your character, especially if you're a foreigner,
Wow. I wish we could keep going on and on. We're going to take a quick break, though. And when we come back, I want to get each of your perspectives on maybe some things that you can think of that we can take action on, right? I want to kind of leave some things that people can do today that will help the cause of bringing us all together. And I want to get your feedback on that. So everyone, we're going to take a quick commercial and we'll be right back.
Soulivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing want to remind you about the importance of continuing to follow public health guidelines to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Please continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Please visit these sites for further information about how to stay safe from COVID-19 into the new year. Remember, love protects us.
You've all done autism awareness training, but what did you really become aware of? That autistic people have obsessive and repetitive behaviours, have trouble making eye contact, don't really make friends easily. It's time for that form of training to go, because what everybody needs, whether it's autistic children or adults in the workplace, is acceptance. So what I would like you to do is to think of everything that you've ever learned about autism and autistic people, crump it all up and throw it away, because this is something completely different. It's an entirely new model of training. It's about neurodiversity, it's about acceptance, and it's how autistic people like me and everyone else out there can grow to live happy and successful lives in school and in the workplace. My name's Jude Morrow, and this is Neurodiversity Training International.
Difficult time these days. Do you really want to sit in a doctor's waiting room when you feel unwell? There is a better way. Introducing Telemedicine by Teledoc. Cost-effective access to a nationwide network of board-certified doctors wherever you are. How does it work? Let's say you or someone in your household doesn't feel well. Just call the toll-free number to speak with licensed, board-certified physicians via phone, video call, or chat, whichever you prefer. Average doctor response time is 10 minutes. Majority of the time, the doctor can diagnose your problem and even call in a prescription if medically needed. With our included RX Valet service, you can even save money on that prescription and have it delivered to your home. But what if your ailment is more of an emotional well-being? When struggles fall outside of the realm of physical health, Teledoc Behavioral is there for you. You're able to schedule a convenient time to connect with a licensed mental health professional that can discuss your most pressing non-physical related problems. And just like the Teledoc service, the same kind of prescription benefits are included when medically needed. All services have no visit fees and are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days per year. A better you without ever leaving your home. Welcome to Health Perks.
So where did the time go, y'all? I mean, we're in our last segment. Before we go, on any of these series, even on my show, I want to try to give our audience something to take away, something to take with them. And I thought that it would be appropriate if I use one of the pillars of the charity that we're raising money for, the APIP, which is democracy thrives when we leverage individual action for collective good as a basis. As people of Asian Pacific descent, what's one way you'd like to see people, either in America or around the world, you can choose, take action for the collective good of all? And I'll go to you, Janet, first.
But I think when I look at my own experiences, I think if everyone could be open, and I think sometimes things like trying to change the world or trying to kind of make it a better place, it's very out there. But I think when you bring it to just your area of influence, or just like anyone who's in front of you at any moment in time, if you can just see them as an individual with all these histories and all this kind of heritage and who they are as an individual, and if you can actually just see them without either your own ignorance or your own kind of baggage against them as a group, or it's like just a witnessing or a receiving of that person in front of you. And the best thing you can do, I think, is to bring this attitude of seeing that interaction as a gift. And you wouldn't have to think too big out there. You would just have to be the best person you can be to the person who's in front of you at any moment. That's how I think I would try to condense everything for myself. I think we're living in this time now where we are all connected, whether by virus or travel or these online meetings. And it doesn't always have to be something out there. It can be like right in front of you. So that's my contribution.
Thank you for that. Serge, how about you? What's one way?
Okay, here's one way. and very simple and very practical. Some people might think it's a little esoteric, but the results are very practical. It's called blessing. And the way we're using the word is in the sense of the meaning of aloha, but which is appreciation, acknowledgement, praise. And what you do is you bless whatever's good around you. Not only the environment, and that's a good thing. You'd be amazed at how good this makes you feel, how much tension it relieves. And esoterically, it empowers whatever it is that you're appreciating. And then this means for people too. There's a stranger, you don't know anything about that person, but that's a nice suit they're wearing. Those are very pretty shoes. Anything that you can see that's good is what you put your attention on. And mentally, you can do it out loud if you want to, but even mentally, it has the effect of empowering you and empowering what you bless. And very simple, very powerful.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. Wow. Marja, how about you? What's one way that you can think of?
Go after that beautiful. Oh God. I think that, back to Janet's point about being open, I think people need to be open and maybe educate themselves on by their own steam. I feel like I want to just do a whole bunch of research about Hawaii now. I'm going to look up your books now. We were talking about this earlier during break, but back to Janet's comment about World War II, I heard a lot of stories about comfort women in Korea and how the Japanese abused them. And so I started doing more research into that, and I had no clue that they had reached Singapore, they had reached the Philippines, even New Zealand. And I just gained this whole knowledge of World War II that I had no clue about because our history books only focused on the Germans. I feel like America needs to do a better job of, we're like global leaders, but we don't teach our citizens about the world. Like people don't differ. We don't even know anything about Hawaii, and that's part of the United States. Like, can we keep an education going? I just started watching a new series. It's not a new series, but it's a Chinese historical drama. It's called Ru Yi's Love in the Palace. It's like 87 episodes. I'm on episode 25. I swear I'm picking up Mandarin now.
Wow.
Take some interest in the world around you. Take some interest in the people that you say, that you respect and want to get to know, but maybe don't have a clue about, where they come from or what their culture is. You have to you can't just wait for it to be fed to you. If you really want to make a difference in the world and really make it closer and bring us closer, because we really we're completely connected. The only thing that's different is clothing, some seasonings, maybe a language or two, but we're really, really more connected than we know.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, that's something, Marja. That yeah, I like that a lot. Here's the final question, and it's more of an ask from each of you. In honor of this special month, what is an empowering thought you would like to give our audience about their connection to the world? What's an empowering thought you want to give? And since I have something special I'm going to ask Serge to do, I'll go with him first, and then I'll ask him this special thing last. So Serge, what's one thought that you can think of?
Well, of course, the thought that comes to mind, which is most empowering, is aloha, which covers all of the things. It's usually translated as love, but it actually means mercy, kindness, helpfulness, and there is no negativity whatsoever. Jealousy is based on anger and fear, not love. Aloha is all about love. The more people can learn about, even if you just say aloha to people, do a little bit of this, that's going to help change things.
Wow. Thank you. And aloha. Marja, how about you? What's one empowering thought?
One empowering thought. I mean, I'd have to agree with Serge on that. I just say love, and I say love in a broad sense of everything. You know, there are moments I'll be in some place beautiful, and I will love each leaf, and I'm a tree hugger in that moment. You know, and then I look in the sky, and I'm like, oh no, the chemtrails are like fucking up our, the atmosphere. Everything feels all encompassing. I think about my ancestors. I think about people, and just, love encompasses so much. So if you keep that in your heart, I think it pushes you forward and pushes all the other positive things out.
Wow. Thank you for that. Janet, how about you?
I guess I have to second Serge and Marja on that. I mean, what was there to add? But that's the thing. If we're part of the world and we want to, add something to it, what better thing to add? I think we have to remember we're part of the world, and so what we want to see more of is what we have to be.
Right.
So yeah, be what you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
Like someone
Exactly.
famous probably said that. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. Before I close out everything, I have a very special ask of our resident expert on Huna. And I know that there's probably, and I know this is probably, I just thought of it, everyone, by the way. There are beautiful stories and probably prayers that you know. Can you close us out today with one of those prayers in Huna?
Okay.
From Huna?
Mamakua aloha mahalo. E ho'o mai kai. I ke akahi. Me ke aloha. Me ka mana. Me ka pono. A mama. Speak to all the highest spirit and to all spirits. Thank you and aloha. May this group be blessed with peace and love and happiness.
Wow. Wow. You got me. You got me on that one. Seriously. I'm like fighting back, trying not to get, and people who know me know that I'm a crybaby. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I want to thank all our guests, Janet Chewy, Dr. Serge Kahili King, and Marja Van der Risten. Thank you all for being here and sharing your light today. You all brought such valuable information and insights. And I know I learned a lot today. And that's what this series is all about. It's about speaking truth to power so that we all can grow. So thank you so much for being here. My cup runneth over in terms of gratitude. So thank you would you guys come back and do like a special show or something like that with me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
With food and karaoke is my request.
Yeah, we'll do a karaoke show. Live feed. Early though. We won't do it
We'd
late.
have to do early, you poor thing. Get some rest.
Well, but it's just been lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh man,
It's meeting you all.
Oh man, it's been my pleasure. Oh man, thanks. It's been my pleasure. Everyone, before we go, I want to announce that next month we have another special Truth and Power event right here on Soulivity TV. You do not want to miss it. On Saturday, June 19th, we are holding a celebration in honor of International Pride Month. Stay tuned to the social media channels and to Soulivity Magazine online for more information in regards to our panel and our discussion points. So you do not want to miss that. Listen, I'm not going to keep you guys. Thank you for being here. On behalf of all of us here at Soulivity, our Soulivity panel for today, this is Brian Wesley Johnson saying thank you for joining us. And of course, I'm wishing you a life, a good life, a best life, a passion, purpose, and high quality living. See you next time.